And now, with it being 5:59, we will move on to the redistricting portion. There are very strict regulations regarding when we have to start that portion of the meeting. So we will continue and resume this portion of the meeting after we finish with the redistricting hearing. Madam Clerk, would you announce the next item, please?
(9A), public hearing regarding redistricting ward boundaries will be heard at 6 p.m. pursuant to California Elections Code Section 21628C.
Thank you. Our next item is public hearings. Tonight's hearing is to hear public comment on the draft redistricting map. We are devoting a total of 30 minutes tonight for speakers. That's 2 minutes per speaker. There will be additional opportunities to hear further from the public on the draft redistricting maps at a tentatively scheduled meeting on February 22nd, and you're always welcome to submit your written comments. It's 30 minutes total, so it's important that you identify yourself, make your statement succinctly so others may speak. There's a clock on the TV screens behind me which indicates 30 minutes. We'll ask you to step to the mic, and at the conclusion of that 30-minute segment, at 29 minutes, a yellow light will come on, and at the end of 30 minutes, a red light will flash, and that will conclude that portion of the meeting. You may ask questions during your statement, but they won't be addressed until the public hearing is closed. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give them to the clerk. She'll give copies to the council. Please be courteous to others who wish to speak. So now, Mr. Clegg, would you like to introduce this, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. This topic, as you're aware, comes up every 10 years, and we have held one hearing on this last calendar year. And we'll give a brief presentation tonight for the public record, and you can forgive us for moving fairly quickly through it as you've seen it before, but we want to present this information for any in the public. This is a new topic too. We'll be presenting a minimum change baseline map to the council tonight that would bring us within reasonable deviations of populations amongst the different wards. And really, this is a kickoff to then receive feedback from council and from the community. And for those reasons, we have a very brief presentation that we'll run through quickly and then open the public hearing. And I'll turn the time over to Brianna Carrier to provide that brief presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Again, Brianna Carrier, Assistant to the City Manager, and I've been overseeing the city's redistricting process so far. So like Christian said, we'll give you an overview here. We'll go over that first draft map that we're presenting and then allow time for public feedback and council comment as well at the conclusion of the hearing. So just take a look at our overall timeline for the redistricting process. Like City Manager Clegg mentioned, we had our first public hearing here in the council chambers last calendar year. That was the first of the required hearings that we had. In between that time, we actually did onboard a consultant to help us with our demographic analysis and some technical assistance, and we are working with redistricting partners. So redistricting partners did apply some technical assistance for a staff-led virtual workshop in December that was online. That was also to solicit additional communities of interest feedback, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here. Tonight, this is our second public hearing in the council chambers. This hearing and the remainder of the hearings will also take place here at time certain. So tonight we started the hearing at 6 p.m. We're introducing our draft map. Our third public hearing will be next month, February 23rd, and this hearing is actually going to focus, if not only, then mainly on the redistricting topic. So we will have dedicated a significant amount of time to redistricting next month, allowing some time for some public comment in between this meeting and the next. So please anticipate attending that one and getting your feedback in prior to that meeting time. Following next month's third public hearing, we'll have the fourth hearing on March 16th. At that point, we'll have a draft map that we will need to do a first reading on to adopt it into the municipal code by ordinance. The final meeting that we'll have, at least scheduled right now, is Wednesday, April 6th, and that will be the 5th public hearing for a final vote on a map determination, second reading of that ordinance. All of this information, again, on our city's website, and I'll show you in a little bit where you can find that as well. So I'm going to, again, just go over a very quick overview of what redistricting is and what some of our requirements are this year. So what is redistricting? Redistricting is the process of adjusting district lines every 10 years after the release of the U.S. Census. The well-known examples are congressional and state legislative districts, but local governments also must do redistricting. Beyond creating districts of equal population, redistricting also serves to empower local communities and preserve voting rights. I'll just make a quick note as well. The term districting, here in the city we use ward. We use them somewhat interchangeably, but we mean the same thing. So here, criteria for adopting district boundaries. This is something that was new this iteration with the Fair Maps Act, that you should have your districts be geographically contiguous, that geographic integrity shall be respected in a manner that minimizes division, should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents, and shall be drawn to encourage geographical compactness. Another guideline that came through for Fair Maps Act was the introduction of communities of interest. And the purpose of this was to allow public comment period time for public input prior to the drafting of our first map. So we did have a significant amount of time in between our first hearing and the draft map. We have received some comments, but we'll go over a little bit what these communities of interest could be. So they are essentially building blocks of districts. A community of interest includes ethnic and language minorities and other groups. They are meant to be subjective. They are meant to be open-ended, to be as inclusive as possible. Communities that are covered by the Voting Rights Act as communities of interest are Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. And the note at the bottom there, while communities of interest may include race, it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. This is just an example list. This is not reflective of any input we've received so far. Just kind of get people thinking of what potentially could be a community of interest that you would want to identify within the city of Bakersfield limits. So things that kind of jump out here, maybe if there's a urban area, downtown area, school zones, school districts, certain neighborhoods, economic areas. Generally, the feedback that we've gotten is if you think that you are geographically confined and you have a common interest, you are likely a community of interest. We would like to know that. So that is what we'd be collecting throughout the process. What is not a community of interest? The Fair Maps Act explicitly prohibits these groups from being considered as communities of interest. Those with a political party affiliation, any incumbents, or any potential political candidate. It's also hard in redistricting to try and put a group together that is not geographically defined. So if it's something like, I've heard the example of fans of a sports team. You know, if they're not in one area and you can't really draw a line around them, they're too watered down. That's not a community of interest. Okay, so that was it for the review for right now. What I'm showing you here is the current ward boundary lines with our 2020 data inserted in them. So this was part of our community workshop we did online as well. I believe this has been out there for a little while. Our current deviation, if we were to keep our boundary lines as they are, would be 17.2%, which is well above an allowable range. So we will be seeing some change in our boundary lines. And just to explain quickly, the way the deviation is calculated is essentially the absolute value, the greatest absolute value of any highest and lowest wards that we see here. Currently, the way the wards are drawn, Ward 2 has the lowest deviation, so we have a very wide swing in population for Ward 2, which needs to grow, and also Ward 3, which currently has the highest deviation, the most populous of the current ward boundaries. Okay, I'm going to pause here to just remind again that all of this information can be found on the city's redistricting website. This is housed under the city clerk's webpage. So if you go to department's webpage, city clerk, you will find ward redistricting. So if any comments come in between now and throughout the process, we can take those at any time. It does not have to be verbally. There are many ways to do that on the website here as well. Okay. So what I actually have here now is the first draft of our baseline map that we're starting with. a little bit hard to see, but we'll go through ward by ward so you can see any changes. And to explain this version of the map here, the colors are the current ward areas. The lines are the proposed areas. So what you'll see is that green area has a little bit of that brownish color in it. That means that that ward area is actually subsuming some of Ward 3. And we'll go through it, but this is just to help you compare. This is with color coding to the current ward boundaries, and this would be the proposed ward boundaries, draft map A. Okay, that chart at the bottom is very hard to see. I'll go through just numbers-wise what we're looking at as far as these different wards. But starting with Ward 1, proposed population would be 54,962 with a deviation negative 5%. There is also a piece of Ward 1 that does go into Ward 2. That's bordered, I believe, by Chester Avenue and P Street from 58 to north to California. So that is a rectangular residential area that is currently proposed to be part of Ward 2. Ward 2, proposed population would be 55,396, proposed deviation of negative 4.3%. And you can see a little bit closer, sort of in the lower right-hand corner, the area that is added to Ward 2. Ward 3, proposed population 56,138, proposed deviation negative 3%. Ward 3 will also see some changes. It's a little easier to see when we look at Ward 4. Taking a look at Ward 4, proposed population 59,783, deviation 3.3%. And this is where you can see that this brown area was previously all of Ward 3. Anything north of Norris Road, with the cutoff being north-south on Callaway, would actually become part of Ward 4. Okay. Ward 5, proposed population 60,249, deviation 4.1%. Ward 6, proposed population 60,890, proposed deviation 5.2%. And then Ward 7, proposed population 57,743, proposed deviation negative 0.2%. So that is the chart that I was just reading off of, just to save my eyesight a little bit. But this, again, is all available on our website, online as well. And at this point, I don't have anything else in the presentation. We can open to public comment or any further staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We can entertain some questions at this point in time, but if Council would prefer to have questions after the public hearing, we're prepared to answer them at that time.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this item? If so, please step to the microphone, identify yourself, and proceed. So we have 2 minutes each on this. Thank you, Ms. Carrier. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Eliana Honeycutt, and I wanted to go in a little bit on Ward 3 in your proposed map. And I wanted to show that Ward 3 is a textbook. Actually, I shared some slides with you all, so please feel free to follow along. It is a packet of about 5 slides. So Ward 3 is a textbook example of incumbent protection gerrymandering. And if you can see slide 1 of your current and proposed maps, there's a 112-foot strip of land that connects Northwest Bakersfield, Norris, and Fruitvale to East Bakersfield. And it's clear this 112-foot isthmus is blatant, which sole purpose is to benefit the incumbent in that district, in Ward 3, Ken Weir, by disenfranchising the communities of color sandwiched between Fruitvale and City in the Hills. If you follow along to slide 2, you can see that this is made even more obvious by the extensive use of zero population areas that allow the larger populations to be connected, mostly oil and riparian areas. There's really no community of interest that explains this configuration. Slide 3 shows that furthermore, population hotspot cluster analysis shows that low population concentration clusters are located near the Kern River riparian and Fruitvale oil field. 4 and 5 slides show that non-Latino white population is concentrated in North Fruitvale in the west portion population center of Ward 3. Now, this is essentially resulting in the disenfranchisement of the East Bakersfield Latino population by the greater voting strength of the non-Latino white population in the far west portion of Ward 3, which, according to your own slides, are communities of covered by the Voting Rights District. And according to your own slides, the number 2 ranked criteria is to also minimize division. Since it's clear that Ward 3 is a textbook example of incumbent protection gerrymandering, we really implore that this board adhere to the best practices formalized under the California Fair Max Act and, of course,
Thank
the
you. Your
Voting
time
Rights
is up.
Act. Thank you for letting me go a little over time.
Thank you, and thank you for the handout. It's a lot easier to follow that way. Next speaker.
I know better than to talk when papers are being passed out. Good
Welcome.
evening.
Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Lori Pasante, and I'm the Director of Civic Engagement and Government Relations for the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And you were doing so well. I brought my mason jar. I had my big rocks for all your Voting Rights Act districts. And then I see a slide that basically tries to tell the world that constitutionally protected classes, our Latinos, our Asian Americans, our African Americans, that's the same thing as those other communities of interest. No, 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 no. No. The City of Bakersfield proposed map currently not only does everything that Eliana just said in District 3, but it totally splits our Punjabi community between wards 6 and 7. It splits our Black community between 4 wards. We haven't had a Black council member since 2010, right? And when we're looking at that map that you currently have, it seems to be the case that you were probably out of compliance back then too. You cannot keep the same map, right? Now you have options. We have proposed a map on behalf of the current Equitable Map Coalition. It draws what you need to have, which is 3 Voting Rights Act districts. Currently, you only have 2, and your proposed map only draws 2. You have to have at least 3. You have to. And the map that we've proposed doesn't have to be the one you accept, but it absolutely draws what you need to do. You need to keep our Punjabi community whole. You need to keep our Black communities whole. You need to empower our constitutionally protected classes, and you have to draw those Voting Rights Act districts. It is the case that when you have an opportunity to analyze it and your consultant has an opportunity to analyze it, you'll get to see the numbers on it. But the PDF that I sent on email, you're more than welcome to zoom in and zoom out and see all the street names. And anybody who wants to come learn about our proposed map, I got copies for everybody in the audience. And you can join us next Wednesday night, and everybody's welcome to come learn about redistricting with us.
Thank you, Ms. Pasante. Who else would like to speak? Seeing none, is there someone I'm missing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and now return it to council for comment. Is there anyone on the council who wishes to speak at this time? I don't see any requests. Yeah. Okay, well, Mr. Clegg, do you wish to say something?
No, Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to clarify, but absent any further questions, there's no further staff comment.
Thank you. We have one more request to speak from Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Clegg, I'm just reviewing the Equitable Maps Coalition maps. Did we receive population counts from the coalition?
Councilmember Gonzalez, I have not had the opportunity to review those materials,
Okay.
and so we can follow up on that question.
All right. That'll be helpful for the next hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. Colleagues, any other requests to speak? Seeing none, we will now go back to our public speakers.